mini Azerbaijan issues, but also more wider flavor of South Caucasus. And today his presentation is on the West and South Caucasus since Russia's 20 invasion of Ukraine. Please, Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Sergey, and thank you for the invitation to be with you here today. Russia's war in Ukraine, I think, has put the South Caucasus back on the map, as it were, of Western policymaking. But alongside the opportunities that has presented, we've also seen significant limits to Western influence in the region. Western engagements in the South Caucasus remain quite diffuse, tactical, ad hoc, and reactive. And this is not surprising given the region's longer-term deprioritization in Western capitals. Western, especially American interests in the region, have often been derivative of more vital interests elsewhere, and in recent years, regional policies were effectively downgraded to customized bilateral approaches. In 2020, the Second Karabakh War provided a starkly negative audit of Western influence and coherence in the South Caucasus. Multilateral frameworks embodying the liberal post-Cold War order collapsed as regional powers Turkey and Russia decided outcomes. And this has resulted in a new saliency to bilateral relations between individual Western and South Caucasus states, and the divergence between a Euro-Atlantic core, which is itself internally differentiated, and nominal allies who do not wear their Western alliance hats in the South Caucasus or Black Sea area. So in terms of specific impacts that we've seen over the last couple of years, I'd like to highlight three trends. The first is that Euro-Atlantic actors find themselves in open and direct competition with a declining but still capable Russia in a theatre of secondary strategic interest. So competition over outcomes in the South Caucasus has become more explicit, more zero-sum, less implicit. And this is a situation that has put pressure on compartmentalization with Russia, a strategy seeking to seal off or firewall certain issues and arenas from wider tensions in the relationship. And some of the most visible symbols of compartmentalization, namely the OSCE's Minsk group, no longer exist. Second, Russian-Western polarity and competition has been tempered by the growing roles of other actors in the region. The geographies in the South Caucasus have been changing for some time now, and we see a much greater salience and presence of Middle Eastern actors in the region in particular. So we can't really talk about South Caucasus geopolitics in terms of just a Russian-Western divide or binary. Russian-Western competition no longer defines the horizons of possible geopolitical trajectories as other actors and factors have become more significant. And what you could see in the region today is a series of nested strategic triangles that limit and constrain the overarching polar dynamics. Thirdly, as Alec has alluded to already, the Ukraine war has allowed for greater agency amongst the regional states, which are all in different ways engaged in balancing strategies and hedging strategies, seeking advantage, or at least to minimize disadvantage, from both the West and Russia. And this is what you might call the opportunism of liminality, the opportunism of existing in the margins. So in the margins of this wider confrontation, the regional states have all sought to maximize their room for maneuver at a time of great power distraction. And this has taken different forms. In Azerbaijan, we've seen militarization, we've seen authoritarian renewal, President Ilham Aliyev is secure in his power until at least 2031. He has a new brand of nationalist legitimacy, and he has been downgrading relationships with Western partners. In Armenia, we've seen democratic renewal, Russian divestment, and efforts towards both upgraded relationships and partnerships with Western actors and multi-alignment beyond a Russian-Western divide. And in Georgia, we've seen a very ambiguous situation, a kind of intentional ambiguity flowing from nominal commitments to European integration, combining with experimentation with authoritarian practices. So experimentation with authoritarian learning, most obviously, of course, in the aborted efforts to adopt a foreign agents law last year. So this is a kind of a hedging strategy led by the political elite that is nevertheless at odds with popular sentiments in the country. So 3 points can be made about all of these trends. While, I agree with Alif that we do see radical changes, we also see a lot of continuity. All of these trends are not new. They preceded the Ukraine war, but they have been amplified and given new scope and new lease of life by the war in Ukraine. So we have continuity and amplification of pre-existing trends. Secondly, these trends are fracturing of the South Caucasus because they take the South Caucasus states in different directions. They identify different horizons, different models. And the third observation is that this divergence illustrates the limits to a regional policy. Some local actors want less of the West, some actors want more, and some want some of what the West has to offer, but not the whole package. So how have Western actors responded to this very challenging context? We see a very uneven balance sheet. There has, on the one hand, been, I think, a growing tension between interests and norms in Western actors' understanding of their role in the South Caucasus, particularly for the European Union as a multilateral entity that foregrounds normative harmonization as a key element of its relationship with neighboring regions. Interests have prevailed over normative considerations in some reactive policy making policy on the hoof in the heat of the moment, such as the gas supply extension deal signed with Azerbaijan in July of 2022. We also see a more geopolitical approach to enlargement in awarding Georgia candidate status in December of last year. There has also been an uneven record of expansions by Euro-Atlantic actors into new roles. Alongside expanding its role as an energy consumer, the European Union in particular has sought to expand into both existing and new roles. It stepped up into a mediation role between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but was humiliated alongside the United States and Russia in September of last year. Azerbaijan's military operation was a vigorous assertion of compartmentalization in that country's relations with Euro-Atlantic partners. The EU has also expanded its security presence by mobilizing the second monitoring mission in the region in an unusual show of policy speed and agility. And as of December, the EU has posited the possibility of its own geopolitical expansion into the region through the possibility of Georgia's accession. So these expansions have been hit and miss. They show both the possibilities and the limits to Western influence, the ability to act and convert opportunities and mobilize in sometimes quite surprisingly quick ways, yet at the same time, the absence of an underlying strategy. Overall, we see a kind of default to the prior customized approach to the region's states. This is to a considerable extent a reflection of this region's realities. Any regional policy in the South Caucasus has to compartmentalize and to customize. But customization also derives from a lack of strategic clarity over what Euro-Atlantic goals in this region actually are. Now, the South Caucasus, with its protracted conflicts, its fractured geopolitics, and its elite society splits, defies coherent regional strategizing. And I want to highlight 4 particular challenges to devising a regional strategy. The first is that there are alternatives to the West and everything that goes with it. In a world of democratic backsliding, there is greater pressure than ever before for norms not to constrain relationships that meet other needs. The challenge is how to assert the value of norms in a crowded marketplace where local actors can, so to speak, go elsewhere. A second challenge is that there is no big idea around which a regional strategy can be based. The nearest thing we have is the much discussed connectivity, which for the EU means the global gateway and the potentials of the middle corridor. Now, while connectivity scenarios seem to promise a long-term role for Euro-Atlantic actors as a kind of technical, financial partner in macro infrastructure, any values-based and sustainability-based approach to connectivity is going to meet with local resistance when it challenges local power configurations. And I think we should be very wary of the ways in which all of the peace-building discussion has been channeled into connectivity, as if connectivity is this depoliticizing win-win context for all. Now, connectivity does rely on norms, on sustainability. It's not a way of circumventing problematic politics. A third challenge is that any regional strategy needs to deal with exceptionalism, whether that means exceptional spaces, such as Abkhazia and South Ossetia, the Tskhinvali region, or whether this means regime types that are openly hostile to liberal democracy. And finally, bridging popular and elite perceptions of Western influence and linkages is a significant challenge. Popular trust in the European Union, in Georgia, and in Armenia, at least until September 2023, was higher than for any other international institution, with 79% of Georgians in favour of EU membership in autumn of last year. So the challenge is to bring and keep elites on board with Europeanisation in a region where political succession is thought about and handled in a very different way. So for all of the change that we see in the last 2 years, we also see a lot of continuity in the South Caucasus. The region continues to be a fractured one. It remains geopolitically undetermined and resistant to both foreign policy autonomy for its constituent actors and to stable hegemony under any outside power. In a recursive pattern, the South Caucasus has again assumed policy relevance because of events elsewhere, rather than because Western actors have clear and defined goals which they are prioritising. A missing element is a clear vision or strategy for the region, as opposed to tactical policy making derivative of interests elsewhere. So this might seem overall like a rather pessimistic outlook, but I think a pragmatic outlook that is cognizant of the limitations and possibilities for Western influence is better than the presumptive hegemony that characterised Western outlooks on the region in the 90s and the 2000s. And it's also the case, of course, that the rival anti-Western project in illiberal regionalisation also faces both similar and different problems, and I hope that we'll get to some of those in the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lawrence, for your interesting presentation. I think that it was especially useful maybe for our colleagues from the European and Western embassies to understand at least the sources of conduct of EU and EU member countries policy in our region. And now we have our next presentation. It will be, I would say, after the Western policy, it will be a presentation about the large elephant, small elephant in a big room, or vice versa. And our Next speaker is Wojciech Goretsky, Senior Fellow of the Department of Turkey, Caucasus and Central Asia, Center for Eastern Studies from Warsaw. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Sergey. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you for inviting me. It's a kind of matter, I hope. In my presentation, I will make some historical excursions. I really believe that history helps to understand present times. History is just a teacher of life. Historia magistra est vitae. For decades, the South Caucasus has been perceived through the prism of the relations between the region and global players. The belief has become established that Armenia is a pro-Russian state, Georgia a pro-Western one, and Azerbaijan maintains a more or less equal distance from both poles. These stereotypes were true to some extent, and at least from a formal point of view. Armenia became more closely associated with Russia during the First Karabakh War, and over time joined all integration formats led by Moscow, including the CSTO. Since the OSCE summit in Istanbul in the autumn of 1999, Georgia has been consistently striving for integration with the structures of the West, which culminated in its being granted the status of a candidate to the European Union in December last year. In turn, Azerbaijan still does not aspire to membership in either pro-Russian or pro-Western structures. The above approach tacitly assumed that the countries of the region were objects, not subjects, of international relations, and the South Caucasus is an area of spheres of influence of global players. These players competed with each other, but were also able to cooperate pragmatically. Such cooperation has taken place for many years within the OSCE Minsk group, established to support the peaceful settlement of the Karabakh conflict. Azerbaijan did not fully fit into the logic presented here. Still, even in this case, the view of the country's position was determined based on the relations connecting Baku with outside centers of power. This stereotypical view of the countries of the region did not take into account the internal political dynamics, and apart from moments of revolutionary crisis, local societies were rarely perceived as actors able to influence the course of events. Therefore, when after Russia's aggression against Ukraine, Georgia, contrary to the expectations of its Western partners, began to tighten relations with Russia, and Armenia, which did not receive Moscow's help in the conflict with Azerbaijan, declared its will to integrate with the West. This was explained in terms of a more or less expected change of alliances. Meanwhile, if we interpret the events of the last years from the perspective of long historical term, longue durée, the picture is not longer so clear, and the influence of Russia and the West in the South Caucasus does not have to be a zero-sum game. For example, Georgian society is indeed very pro-Western, as you mentioned. Still, at the same time, it is characterized by great conservatism. Moreover, the Georgian Orthodox Church has always maintained very close relations with the Russian Orthodox Church. It is worth mentioning that the Russian Orthodox Church recognizes Abkhazia and so-called South Ossetia as the canonical territory of the Georgian Church. Due to the lack of time, I will focus only on Armenia in my presentation. Still in the paper I'm preparing for the Caucasus Institute, I will also develop Georgian and Azerbaijan topics. The outbreak of the Karabakh conflict preceded the collapse of the Soviet Union and in fact partially contributed to it. Its driving force was Armenia's demand to change the borderline between the two republics. This revision was demanded by both the Armenian SSR's authorities and its public, which had started to spontaneously self-organize at the time of Perestroika. The most important initiative in this regard was the Karabakh Committee, which was established by a group of intellectuals who had the goal of including Nagorno-Karabakh into the borders of Soviet Armenia. The result of the Kremlin's dismissal of this demand was an outbreak of anti-Azerbaijani riots in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, as well as protests against Moscow. And it was Moscow, not Baku, which was the primary addressee of the Armenian claims. After the pogrom of the Armenian population, which took place in Sumgait in February 1988, the Armenian national movement started to exhibit a clearly anti-Soviet nature, and its activists started to believe that the only way their aspiration could be fulfilled was to leave the Soviet Union. These sentiments grew stronger in December 1988 when the Soviet authorities arrested 12 activists of the Karabakh committee, and they were released after 6 months under the pressure of Soviet and international public opinion. They returned to their homeland as heroes, and in this way they gained a decisive impact on the politics in Yerevan. Ter-Petrosian became a deputy to Supreme Soviet, then he became chairman of the Supreme Soviet of Armenian SSR for its new term, and in October 1991 he became the first president of Armenia, and Armenia became first Republic of Armenia, and then declared its in September 1991, proclaiming independence, confirming the Republic's departure from Soviet Union. And it's very interesting that in autumn 1988, the outstanding Polish journalist reporter Ryszard Kapuściński visited Armenia 2 years before the collapse of the Soviet Union. He visited Armenia, collecting materials to his book Imperium in Polish. And he visited Yerevan during his tour to South Caucasus republics. And in his book he wrote that it was during his stay in Yerevan when he realized that the USSR would collapse. In the first phase of the Karabakh conflict, Moscow actively supported Azerbaijan. This was first of all caused by its fear of setting a precedent which could encourage more nations to put forward their own demands, leading to a chain reaction which could be hard to halt. Secondly, Moscow hoped that it would stop the centrifugal tendencies within these two republics in this way. Moscow continued to implement its annual policy towards the conflict for some time after the collapse of the USSR, while the full-scale war was lasting in Nagorno-Karabakh. This resulted from the fact that Armenia was now being ruled by Democrats who were attempting to conduct an independent foreign policy, while Azerbaijan was still being ruled by pro-Russian communists. The Russian approach changed only after Abu Fazl-Chigay came to power in Azerbaijan. At the turn of 1992 and 1993, there was an Armenian-Russian rapprochement, and both countries established allied relations. It was a pragmatic step on Armenia's part and understandable in the circumstances at that time. Anyway, Yerevan was still looking for opportunities to expand its room for maneuver. When the Eastern Partnership Initiative was born, Yerevan joined it. The association agreement with the European Union, which should have established a deeper and comprehensive free trade areas, the CFTA, between Armenia and the EU, was to be signed in autumn 2013 after 3 years of hard negotiations. Instead, under Russian pressure, Yerevan joined the Moscow-led Eurasian Economic Union. Shortly after announcing this decision, I met Ali Iskandarian at Valdai Forum, and I remember his deep disappointment that time. I also remember Nikol Pashinyan's revolution. I was in Yerevan in April in 2018 and talked to people close to Pashinyan. They told me that once they come to power, they would not break agreements with Moscow. Their goal, declared goal, was to reform the country and wait for the right moment to correct Yerevan's foreign policy vector. I will not judge whether and to what extent the reforms were successful, but I would like to point out that the specific thought about Armenia's European perspective accompanied Pashinyan's team from the very beginning. Shortly thereafter, delegations from Armenia interested in our experiences on the road to integration with the West began to arrive in large numbers for study visits to Poland and other new EU countries, EU member states. Moscow treated the new Armenian authorities with suspicion, not hiding its hostile attitude towards grassroots revolutions, and even more so towards the pro-Western aspirations of post-Soviet countries. During the Second Karabakh War, in the autumn of 2020, Moscow saved Armenia from final defeat, but did not provide it with as much help as Yerevan expected. Over the following months, Moscow did not respond to Azerbaijan's attacks on Armenian territory, failing to fulfill its obligations as Armenia's ally. The Russian peacekeeping forces deployed to the conflict area remained passive. In September last year, when Azerbaijan took control over the rest of unrecognized Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, the Russian authorities openly expressed hope that the dissatisfaction of the Armenian public would lead to the overthrow of the government of Nikol Pashinyan. In response to this, Armenia has demonstratively distanced itself from Russia through a number of gestures and statements, and signaled its desire for rapprochement with the West. In an interview with the Italian daily La Repubblica last September, Pashinyan stated that relying on Moscow as its only partner in the security sphere had been a strategic mistake, and that the country was only now trying to diversify its policy. Then, the Prime Minister dismissed Armenia's permanent representative to the CSTO and failed to appoint his successor. Other anti-Russian steps taken in the months include not allowing the head of the Russian Society for Friendship and Cooperation with Armenia into the country, a visit by Pashinyan's wife to Kyiv, along with a shipment of humanitarian aid, the first sent by Armenia to Ukraine since the outbreak of the war, ratification of the Rome Statute of International Criminal Court. Adopting this measure obliged Armenia to detain Vladimir Putin and hand him over to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Relations between Yerevan and Moscow have cooled at least to the level they were at the turn of the 80s and 90s. I tried to show here the internal dynamics that led to Armenia's so-called pro-European turn, or, as I noted in the title of my presentation, a change of alliances with a question mark. In fact, this vector has been present in Yerevan's politics practically forever, and it has always been supported by a significant and over time an increasing part of Armenian society. The only new situation is the very high degree of openness towards Armenia on the part of the European Union, not to mention individual EU countries. As we know, Tango is not danced alone. This opening would not be possible without Russia's aggression against Ukraine. The region gained importance after the outbreak of the full-scale Russian-Ukrainian war, which became a real game changer, and of course I agree with Ali Iskandarian. For the West, including the EU, the region has become one of the sources of raw materials competing with Russia, and the transport and communication route bypassing it, I mean the initiatives around the Middle Corridor. Brussels' quick decisions to send observation missions to Armenia, discussions about sending a Frontex mission, and the fact that the EU is also raising, for now only hypothetically, the issue of transferring non-lethal military equipment to Armenia as part of the European peace facility show the scale of changes that have taken place in the environment around the region. There is no doubt that the entire South Caucasus has become more important in the last 2 years, and certainly the West is stronger here now. But as I said, it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. For Moscow, which is ostracized, the region has become one of its window to the world and an important link in the system of bypassing sanctions. I will not end my presentation with any conclusions. The situation in the region and beyond is extremely dynamic. We live in times when anything can happen. However, not only bad things are possible, but also good things. Let's hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wojciech. As you said, there are many stereotypes about the positioning between different countries and their sympathies or alliances. And it's also relevant towards the persons, the special relationship, so-called, between Russians and Poles very important and very known. And it was a bit some kind of tricky to have a Polish expert who is talking about the Russian policy in the region. However, because our experts, they have just a professional identity, not the ethnic, so I appreciate a lot your non-biased assessment of Russian policy in the region. And of course, I think that our audience will have a lot of questions in detail to understand more about the Russian policy in our region, not only about history, but also the possible prospect, and we'll still have a lot of time for questions and answers session. So our two previous experts, they represent a position of two competing actors, so-called collective Western actors, and Russia. Professor Stanьте, he presented the general framework. And now we have in this panel, last but not least, important presentation about an actor who traditionally was able and is able to conduct some kind of balance between these two competing actors. And Professor Mustafa Aydin from Turkey, our good friend and colleague, recently we also met with him in Istanbul, and we had very, I would say, deep academic round table together with you. So today, Professor Aydin, he has a lot of different affiliation, and today he's in affiliation with a global academy coordinator, but he's previous rector and one of the well-known Turkish experts in general about Turkish foreign policy, but also about Turkish policy in projection to our age. Please, Mustafa,
Thank you, Sergey. Thank you for Caucasus Institute, Alex and Sergey, for inviting me back to Yerevan. I was here before the pandemic, so this is my first time since the pandemic, and it's nice to be back and able to talk to this audience. Let me start with some general observations. The geopolitics of the Caucasus since the end of the Cold War have been changing with wars and enduring conflicts. And this is a very permanent, it has become a kind of a structural qualities of the region, that the number of conflicts that emerged here in early 1990s have not been solved. They keep continuing and keep recoming. We used to employ the terminology of frozen conflicts, and at the same time not believing that they were frozen, but nevertheless we use that terminology to refer to them. This is, for me, it's a reminiscence of pre-20th century Caucasus. Because when you look back at history, our Polish colleague already looked rather deeply, but I will just repeat one aspect of it. If you look at the history, this region, very small region of the world actually, was a scene for conflict and competition between three empires, right? Russian, Ottoman, Turkish, and Persian empires. That was the defining characteristic of the region before the 20th century. Of course, during the 20th century, it was the Soviet, I would call empire, that imposed some sort of a stability to the region, a stability that regional people, the countries, and the people in the region were not happy to have anyway. But it was a different type of a stability. So since the end of the Cold War, it looks like a deja vu. We moved back to pre-20th century Caucasian geopolitics, and there has been a number of circles of competition. It's not one competition anymore. In the history, it was much easier to define the competition. Since the end of the Cold War, the competition it looks like a concentric circles. There was a competition in 1990s, mostly between Turkey and Russia, a very intense competition. And it was not only about the Caucasus, it was in the wider geography of what I would call Eurasia, from Central Asia to the Balkans. But in the 2000s, there was a competition, an influence game between two greater powers, outside greater powers, between Russia again on the one side and the United States on the other side. There is a competition between the regional countries. Although we had experimented, or at least we had discussions on a number of suggestions for regional integration, some friends of mine call them alphabet soup because of the number of mathematical formulas like 3 plus 3 plus 2, 2 plus 1, and so on and so forth. None of these discussions led to anything because the regional countries watch each other and also they are in competition with each other towards, especially to the attention of the outsiders. Whether it's the European Union or whether it's the United States or whether it's Turkey, the regional countries also are in competition with each other for the outside attention because they factor or they think that this kind of connection with outside powers will help them to have more influence within their own region, and that's also another circle. This has been quite a well-known and well-established structural characteristic of the region until 2008. Since 2008, what's changing the regional geopolitics is Russia, and in different way. Up until 2008, it was a quite well-known Russian involvement in regional conflicts, very indirectly usually. They try to leverage the Russian positions in the region through a number of so-called frozen conflicts. But since 2008, the Russian aims in a wider geography, not only focused on Caucasus, but in a wider geopolitical region, including Black Sea and I would argue Mediterranean, there would be a consecutive number of wars. And some people call it Russian comeback, some people call it Russian resurgence, some people call it Russian re-empire, establishing re-empire or whatever. But this is a direct challenge from Russia to what it saw a sovereign choice from regional countries that it didn't like. 2008 was one of the first examples, and we had so many meetings in here also to talk about it. We argued, and I still argue, that the inability of the Western powers to stand up against Russian aggression in 2008 led to 2014 and led to final attempt for occupation of Ukraine, and that's the real basis of change of geopolitics in the region in recent years. Challenging of Russia have been quite difficult for not only regional actors, but nearby actors like Turkey, and also faraway actors like the United States, with fleeting interest. I would say fleeting interest, because when you look at it, the outsiders have a wider geopolitical interest, and especially if it's the United States, it is a global interest. If it's the European Union, it has so many interests clashing of its members, it's unable to develop a geopolitical position, especially regarding this region. I have been involved and talking with a number of European representatives, EU representatives to the region from the earliest days, and never come across a geopolitical or strategic approach from the European Union to the Caucasus. The second point I'd like to make, which I already said, but expand on it, now with the Russian military operations since 2008 and the others, it has created a wider geopolitical region. The Caucasus cannot be analyzed now as Caucasus, because this is a region now in an interaction in the Black Sea. Why the Black Sea region? It's part of it anyway, but it's now what's happening in the Black Sea in Ukraine is affecting what's happening in the Caucasus, and it will affect what's happening in the Caucasus. However, with the Russian behavior, especially since 2014, Black Sea is not confined to Black Sea either. The Black Sea and the Mediterranean, especially the Eastern Mediterranean, has become one unit of analysis from geopolitical perspective. Because Russian actions in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean, and what I would call Levant region, was supported by Russian Black Sea fleet based in Crimea, the occupied Crimea. So the connection was very clear from 2014 onwards. Russian establishment of a Mediterranean fleet was supported by, again, from its Black Sea fleet. Russian operations in Syria was logistically supported by its Black Sea fleet based in Crimea. So when you look at all this, you can understand the geopolitical importance of Russia, for Russia, the Crimea, why it occupied Crimea in the first instance. So when we are looking for the future of the Caucasus, we should be looking in this wider geography and the geopolitical changes, which makes it much more complex. I will come back to this point. Another point, since 2014 and leading up to the Russia-Ukraine war, is the militarization of the wider Black Sea region. This also have a limited effect on the Caucasus, but having a wider Black Sea become militarized, excessively militarized, with especially Russian investment on its Black Sea fleet and also on its defense systems, land-based defense systems in Crimea, in North Caucasus, and in the Caucasus itself. The region has become overly militarized. The final war of Ukraine was actually a kind of outgrowth of this militarization of the region. What all these wars so far since 2008 have shown is a number of aspects. One is, and I think we have all deduced this lessons. One is Russia cannot abide with the choice of its neighbors, independent choices of its neighbors. What it's called since mid-1990s, Russian near abroad. We all analyze it, we all talk about it, but it seems that Russian near abroad is important, and it seems some sort of a sovereign operational area for Russia. We neglected that. We just thought that this was a kind of a demolition of a region from a political perspective. It seems that Russia takes it very seriously and thinks that this is the area that it has a right to have military operations when it seems necessary. And a number of wars have already proven that. Another lesson, I think this was a lesson from 2008, and it's repeated afterwards, is that Russia is too near and the God is too far away. I mean, this is a bitter lesson Caucasian people got it from the history. It's not a new lesson. This is I'm repeating, of course, the things that I heard in the Caucasus over the years. This is a historical lesson re-emerged from 2008 onwards. Russia is here, and any attempt to dislodge it creates conflict. This, of course, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be an effort to dislodge it, but we have to be aware of the realities. Another lesson is, and it's very clear now, Russia is willing willing to use force to further its political aims and, if necessary, challenge international order. When you listen to the Russian argumentation, the President Putin's argumentation or any other leading Russian officials vis-à-vis Ukraine, you will start thinking in what kind of a world they are living in. You know, the arguments they are using is not from the 21st century. The arguments are like from the 17th century, even 16th century of European geopolitical games. Talking about historical realities and historical rights. And if we all start talking about our historical rights and feelings, well, we know what happens. You know, last night we were talking, one of the clear characteristics of Armenia is that Armenia has a deep history, right? Long history. But all of us have. You know, if you talk to the Azeris, they will say they have a huge historical background. If you talk to the Turks, everybody originally were Turks in the world. And if you talk to the Georgians, they will say repeat the same story, including the wine. Listening to this kind of argumentation is a very clear challenge for international system and international order and international regulations. Another lesson, I think, it started in 2008 and led to 2014, maybe now changing, is that the West cannot protect the regional countries from Russian aggression. This is changing now with NATO finally started to creating what I would call a wall of defense in Western Black Sea. But this has not yet reached to the Caucasus. NATO reorganization of its forces and its planning is so far are about Ukraine and the challenge that Russia is presenting in Eastern Europe towards the NATO territory. It doesn't involve the eastern part of the Black Sea, that's the Caucasus. The question remains whether if there is another challenge in the Caucasus by Russia, would outside powers, including the West and Turkey and some other outside powers, would they be able to help the regional countries to sustain their defense? Another lesson is economic cooperation in this region with the regional countries and outside countries would be tolerated, would be accepted by Russia, but not political and especially military cooperation. Anytime regional countries try to create an open military cooperation with outsiders, there has been a reaction from Russia. But obviously, the final lesson I draw from all of this is there is a need to balance Russia in a wider context. It's not the Caucasus. We cannot focus on Caucasus balancing Russia. We have to focus on a wider geography, including the Black Sea, the Levant and the Mediterranean, so that we can be balancing Russia. Why I'm focusing so much on Russia? Not only because the title of the conference says it, but I fundamentally believe that it's the Russia that has been challenging the balances created in the region since the end of the Cold War. None of the regional balances that emerged, geopolitical balances in the region, Russia has been happy with. They keep challenging it for themselves, for a better region. Recently, of course, a number of actors are trying also to make a comeback to the Caucasus. One of those, of course, is the European Union. We already heard the European Union attempt of enlarging it with new membership. As far as the Caucasus is concerned, so far it's only Georgia and it's half Arctic. And one thing that we all have to remember regarding the EU membership is that although I believe it's more than political, economic, and it has political implications, it usually takes years to finalize. So the EU's impact in the Caucasus will be in future. Right? If it's finally enlarges to include Georgia, EU would be an actor in the Caucasus, but it will be in years. It's not in the next maybe 10 years. As I said, NATO so far have no strategic policy in strategic relations towards the Caucasus, except NATO member country Turkey is quite active in training Azerbaijani forces and also have been in military cooperation with Georgia. But I have my doubt whether this could be counted as NATO influence in the region. It's more Turkish influence to real NATO. US is still oscillating between isolationism and international activism. And we are all everywhere, in Ukraine, in widely Black Sea, and in the Caucasus. We are all waiting what the elections of the United States are going to present us. We don't know what will be the US policy in a year's time. US was quite active in the Caucasus, as we all know, after the 9/11 events. And the reason of that activity was not about the Caucasian countries. It was about the needs of the US for securing its interest in sub-regions of the world. One of them was the Caucasus. That activity, and especially focused on the Georgia, ended quite abruptly after 2008, and the United States withdrew from the region. When I say region, it was not only the Caucasus. It withdrew from the Black Sea. There is no mention of Black Sea in any American strategic documents until last year. Now they are debating to develop American strategic policy for the Black Sea, which, by the way, do not include the Caucasus. So we don't know what's the American strategic position in the Caucasus, what they are ready or prepared to do in the Caucasus yet. Some European countries obviously try to be more active, primarily France, especially through Armenia, but their action is limited and their influence are still limited. So this leaves two actors, both regional and outside, Turkey and Russia. And it is, of course, when we talk Turkey and Russia, to say that their relationship is complex is nothing. Right? It's ultra complex. Or, yesterday night we were in deep discussions about this, right? And I said, there are 4, 5, 6 layers in Turkish-Russian relations. And people just pick up one of the layers and they assume this is the case. There is a competition between Russia and Turkey. Sure. There is a huge historical library which continues today. Sure. There is a cooperation between Russia and Turkey. Yes, that's true. There is a tremendous economic and trade relationship between Turkey. True. Turkey does not cooperate with Western sanctions on Russia. True. Turkey bought S-400 missiles from Russia. True. But Turkey is supplying Ukraine a valuable military gear and building up 4 corvettes, for example, to Ukraine to use in the Black Sea against Russia as well. Turkey is keeping the straits closed, which originally people thought that it might help Russia because Russia had the upper hand in the Black Sea, in the naval first. But now, 1/3 of the Russian Black Sea naval force is decapacitated by the Ukrainian attack, and Russia is unable to replenish of its forces, naval forces in the Black Sea because the straits are closed, so it's hurting Russia now. So the relationship between Turkey and Russia is very complex. And when you look at the Caucasus, there is an interesting reflection. First, Russia, since the end of the Cold War, this is the first time after the Second Karabakh War, Russia have military forces in all three countries. I would include Abkhazia and South Ossetia and Georgia here. Their qualities are different. In Azerbaijan, they are peacekeepers. Supposed to be with you. In Armenia, they are here with the bilateral agreement, defending the borders. In Georgia, they are partly occupiers, partly peacekeepers, or whatever they call themselves. But the fact that the three Caucasian countries now have Russian military forces on their soil, we have to take that into account. Secondly, for the first time in 100 years, Turkey has a military contingent in Azerbaijan after 100 years, which is, the number is very small. It's not important militarily, but psychologically and politically, I think it's quite an important, and it shows Turkish comeback to the Caucasus after some hit-outs since 2008. After 2008, Turkey also, alongside with the Western countries, somewhat withdrew from the competition with Russia in the Caucasus. But now, despite the seeming cooperation between Russia and Turkey to the detriment of Western influence in the Caucasus after the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War, Turkey is more firmly back to the Caucasus in competition with Russia at the same time. We have to, when we are looking to Turkish-Russian relations and how that impacts the Caucasus, we have to again look into the wider geography. Turkish-Russian relations are conditioned by Turkish-American relations, especially in Syria and Iraq. Turkey is gravitated to cooperate with Russia more and more because it has a problem with the United States in Syria and Iraq because the US has connections with the Kurdish groups. I keep repeatedly say that for Turkey, Syria is a survival issue, on that level. Ukraine is a regional security issue. We have to see the difference between the Turkish policy towards Syria and Turkish policy in the Caucasus, in the Black Sea, from this perspective. So the Syria, in that sense, and Turkish-American relations in Syria regarding the Kurds have determining effect how Turkey approaches to Russia. Because Russia is the only actor that allows Turkey to balance the United States in Syria. That kind of a cooperation that then enhances or weakens, if you like, from that perspective, weakens Turkish hand in different theaters against the Russian influence. Or the challenging Russia becomes as difficult when you are cooperating with Russia in one theater of cooperation. Nevertheless, Turkey has been challenging Russia, interestingly, in different theater of operations. In Syria, Syria is included. Not directly, but with kind of a proxy warfare. Turkey has been operating in Syria against the Russian interest also. In Libya, we were in different sides. In Nagorno-Karabakh, obviously we were not opposing to each other, but the Azerbaijanis were using Turkish strategies and the drones against the Soviet era or Russian so Russian security defense mechanisms, and they were successful. And we are doing the same thing in now Ukraine. So to say that this relationship is complex is nothing. The cooperation, yes, but confrontation. And Turkey was, I have to repeat this and remind everybody, people usually forget this. Turkey has been the only NATO country since the Korean War to shut down a Russian plane. I'm not proud of it. I'm not sure the Turkish leaders are proud of it. But that's the case. It sounded crazy at the time, 2015, but it happened. Any other NATO country, they became very worried that this kind of a behavior, Turkish behavior, unpredictable Turkish behavior, might lead a war between NATO and Russia. They were right. But nevertheless, the case remains Turkey is the only Western, only NATO country that shut down a Russian airplane since the Korean War. So the relationship is complex. Regarding the Caucasus, I'm finishing here. You have time? Okay. Realistically, I would argue Turkey is the only country in this vicinity that can challenge Russia in the Caucasus and in the Black Sea if it wants. This is an important caveat. Turkey has been, the lessons that I listed for the Caucasian countries also lessons for Turkey too. Because 2008 was an eye-opener for Turkey too. Up until 2008, Turkey was a very clear opponent of Russian influence in the Caucasus and Central Asia, less so, but in the Caucasus and the Black Sea. But 2008 showed that when Turkey was sidelined in the Caucasus, and when the countries in the neighborhood didn't listen to the warnings that was coming from the Turkey, there was nothing that Turkey could do against Russia by itself, because its alliance partners in NATO were not doing or cannot do anything else as well. So that left Turkey also alone in the Caucasus and in the Black Sea, facing Russian resurgent naval power. 2011 is the turning point in the Black Sea. Up until 2011, the Turkish naval force was had the upper hand in the Black Sea since the end of the Cold War because of the diminishing Russian ability to keep its Black Sea force. But by the 2011, Russia became the dominant sea power in the Black Sea. This was then supported by 2014 with the occupation and annexation of Crimea and taking over of whole territory. From 2014 onwards, Turkey and Russia has almost the same territorial waters across the Black Sea as they had during the Cold War. People do not remember, but during the Cold War, it was Turkey and the rest. The rest was controlled by Soviet Union and its allies. This is what Turkey saw after 2014, because the naval forces of Bulgaria and Romania is nothing. The other, Ukraine didn't have anything after Crimea. Georgia doesn't count here, and it's only Turkey. There is a challenge here of this. There is a push factor coming from different countries, especially from the region, from Romania and sometimes from Bulgaria, and outside the region, sometimes from the United States, to open up the Black Sea for outside forces to come into this Black Sea with their naval forces, the NATO forces. And this is a policy that Turkey adamantly rejects. Again, let me remind you history here, why Turkey is so adamant to apply the Montreux Convention to keep the Black Sea for the Black Sea countries. Since the 17th century, when then the Russian Tsarist Empire occupied first time the Crimea, since then one of the leading factors of the warfare in Eastern Europe in what Turkey is now connected and situated was the control of the straits. Which country is going to control the straits? The first global war before the First World War, that's the Crimean War, was actually fought about this issue, on this issue exactly. If during the First World War, one of the biggest battles of the First World War fought over the control of the Dardanelles and the Straits. At the end of the Second World War, people ignored it. In 1945, in Potsdam, Russia, United States, and United Kingdom, their presidents and prime ministers, Prime Minister in the case of UK and the presidents of other countries, actually negotiated who's going to have an influence on the Straits. 1945. So the Turks have a long memory of history. We don't forget. And that's the result why Turkey is so insisting to keep the Montreux Convention not to be challenged. Because we know if we forgo the Montreux Convention, we go back to the previous cases. The challenging and also competition to control the Straits will become a defining issue in the Black Sea. Let us not forget, the Montreux Convention was done to provide security to the Soviet Union. It was not about Turkey. It partly was about Turkey, restoring the sovereignty of Turkey on the Straits. But the main definition, the main defining characteristics of the Montreux Convention was to provide security for the Soviet Union in the Black Sea. The countries who signed the convention recognized that when you challenge that, they challenge the ownership of the Straits. So that's why Turkey is still keeping its option in that sense open. So finally, let's look at the Caucasus for the scenarios. What would happen in the Caucasus after all this geopolitical mumbo-jumbo? The worst-case scenario is the possibility of spillover of the Ukrainian war or Russian-Ukrainian war. And I would say this is a real possibility. People are thinking that the war in Ukraine is almost over, it's terminated and it's not moved. No. This summer or towards the summer, most probably we are going to see another push by Russia if they are able to. Right? And then we have to see what would be the Western response, not the Ukrainian response, but the Western response. There is already talk, as you know, of sending non-official Western soldiers to the ground. There was a rumors or even the news that the French legionnaires are already in Ukraine. And we know that a paper was circulated among the NATO countries asking whether they are, some of them at least, are willing to create a coalition of willing by the French. So this is the direction that conflict is continuing. Whether by Russia or by any other actor, the spillover to the Caucasus is possible, yeah, it might be. This is the worst case scenario. Another part of the worst case scenario is what would a defeated Russia in Ukraine would do in its neighborhood. I know people here in the Caucasus, in Central Asia, in other neighboring regions of Russia are thinking about this. What would a defeated Russia do to recover its pride? Would Russia become militarily more provoking in the Caucasus, for example? Would they revert back to their previous action of poking regional differences or this so-called frozen or non-frozen conflict? I don't know, but that's a worst-case scenario. The best-case scenario is to lead to some sort of a regional opening. In a very interesting way, the wars, both the Second Karabakh War and also the war in Ukraine, has opened up possibilities in the Caucasus towards more integration with the world, and especially with the West. This is an interesting opening now. There is a possibility of further interaction and further connectivity, increasing the connectivity. The Middle Corridor project, linking China to Europe through the Caucasus, especially if we can manage the unsolved conflicts yet, that's a real possibility also. So this is the best case scenario, creating this Middle Corridor, creating further connectivity with outside world, and leading to regional integration. That's the best case scenario. What's the realist scenario? I'm always dealing with it towards the realist scenario. I think somewhere in between. The history of the Caucasus have shown us that continuation of no war, no peace situation would be the norm for the next few years or the next 10 years, decade, couple of decades. This will continue to have sustainability of the tensions. Tensions in the region will continue, whether it's between the regional countries, especially between Azerbaijan and Armenia, or between regional countries and outsiders, or outsiders over the region, between Russia and Turkey primarily. So the tensions will continue in this region. We will see some improvements in the connectivity in the best way that I told. Not full, but some of it, because most of it is really dependent on the solution of the problem. We will see balancing action from outsiders, the outside actors, over the region, on the region, and in the region. So we will see increasing balancing action of Turkey against Russia in the Caucasus. We might see some cooperation between the United States and Turkey in the Caucasus, because U.S.-Turkey relations seem to be moving to the right direction in other regions, so it might also spill over into the Caucasus. We might see continuation of ambiguity on behalf of the three countries. The ambiguity and kind of in-betweenness in foreign policy for the three Caucasian countries seems to be the defining position. It looks like the best option when you don't have a very clear option, because moving clearly towards the West invites Russian reaction. Moving towards the Russia is not what I wanted. Moving to any other direction is not a real option. So in between this and oscillating between different actors seems to be the order of the day. In this kind of an environment, no clear regional project idea to further regional integration might survive. I mean, I know there was a suggestion of, especially from Azerbaijan and Turkey, it's 3+3. It cannot get out of the ground because of the very clear objection of Georgia to such a project. Only way to open up the region necessitates external push and external involvement. This is quite clear. The regional dynamics do not produce by themselves regional integration processes. However, as I said, any kind of an external involvement brings dangers of military involvement and increasing tensions also. So that's, I think, is the dilemma of the Caucasus. We will be facing that in the future.
Thank you, Professor Ali, for your very detailed view from the source on our region. When recently we visited Turkey and had meeting with officials or with experts, once more time I was really surprised by the level of how deep in Turkey trying to rationalize Russian tech. You said about the complexity of Russian-Turkish relations, which also the historical details. However, even or maybe especially in this framework of integration of Russia from the Western, NATO, EU member countries, this special element of Russian-Turkish relations and the role of Russia in strategic calculus of Turkey is very familiar. Even in comparison with my previous visit before in 6 or 7 years ago. So this is an important factor, and of course, I think we will also touch this issue during our discussion. We have quite a lot of time, and I appreciate our speakers that they worked almost an hour for the most important and interesting part of our panel, discussion and questions and answers. And of course, I would like to exploit my administrative resource and those questions. Actually, I will ask all our speakers except Ambassador, of course, and with the same order, and we'll start with Lawrence. And maybe I will ask you the most complicated question. So, Fred, what shall we read? So, and I think that many people here in this audience would like to ask this question to you. So, how long do you think West will tolerate this Azerbaijani coercive diplomacy toward Armenia, and especially in the framework of this dramatically changing Armenian-Russian relations? Do you think that there are any borders when you could react, or there are no any borders, and this kind of coercive Azerbaijani policy has other, I would say, parameters to be observed?
I think there already has been a clear threshold, a kind of a moment when Azerbaijani militarist escalatory policy finally bumped up against Western resistance, and that was in September 2022. Rightly or wrongly, international protections of minorities who are within the recognized territory of the United States are inadequate. But state-on-state violence triggers a wholly different set of international responses and mechanisms. And it was very noticeable in September 2022 that a number of September 2022, when Azerbaijan attacked Armenia. We saw a very different kind of rhetoric coming from several key states, clearly identifying Azerbaijan as the aggressor. Rather than using this kind of both-sidist formula, which has caused a lot of frustration in Armenia. So I think, to my mind, obviously there's a lot of people asking whether Azerbaijan might now invade Armenia. And my answer to that is that it would trigger a different set of responses from the ones that we've seen to different escalations in Mountainous Karabakh. Would it be worth it to Azerbaijan to do that? The second that Azerbaijan invades Armenia in a large-scale operation, Ilham Aliyev becomes Vladimir Putin, he becomes Saddam Hussein. Notwithstanding that, I do recognise there are extraordinary parallels in the discourse and rhetoric that Putin puts forward about Ukraine, that Aliyev puts forward about Armenia, and this is extremely concerning. How might Azerbaijan respond to this? I think the risks are Azerbaijans are very much aware of these risks, and that's why we see a kind of an incremental, salami tactics kind of approach, and it's about holding on to pockets of territory that don't sort of tip over into a larger scale conflict. So my fear is that what we might see, rather than a large-scale invasion, is more limited escalations, particularly as we saw, I think it was on the 12th of February, escalations in areas where the ED mission has limited access, Nevkin Hand, and that this might be the onwards trajectory. The state-on-state threshold is the key threshold. I would also add, I think there is much more awareness about Armenia and Azerbaijan, about this conflict, about what's at stake, than there was, say, 4 years ago in Western capitals. And so this is also, I think, a positive. I do sense a change of attitude, of awareness, of knowledge, which I think would contribute to a more cohesive response in the case of large-scale state-on-state violence.
Thank you, Lawrence. And next question goes to Walter. You stopped your presentation on the most important and interesting point. I understand that for experts it's usually very difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. So, however, I think for our audience and for our experts, colleagues, it will be interesting also to understand your personal opinion about what kind of, I would say, concrete or real steps, for example, and conduct Russia could try toward Armenia if this trajectory of, I would say, some kind of complicating relations between Moscow and Yerevan continues. What do you think? What kind of measures, steps could Russia apply in this sense?
Thank you, Sergey. As you noticed, the future is unpredictable, but in the case of Russia, also the past is unpredictable, as you know. There are two aspects of your question. First one is, does Moscow has Moscow instruments to do anything, taking into account engagement in Ukraine, what Moscow wants to do and what Moscow is able to do. I don't think that Moscow has strong instruments here in Armenia. There were information about withdrawing peacekeepers and sending them to Ukraine, sending the equipment of the peacekeeping contingent to Ukraine. So we are short of soldiers, as you know, and so short of equipment. Also in Ukraine, and they need to take both from South Caucasus and other place. So I don't think that Russia is able to conduct a huge-scale operation here in Armenia and in South Caucasus. This is one aspect of your question. But anyway, still Moscow has more hidden instruments, special operations, something like that. I'm not specialist in this area. What Moscow would like to do, I think that this is a personal moment. The hatred in the case of Putin towards Nikol Pashinyan. Putin for sure would like to overthrow Pashinyan and to change the government in Armenia. I think that he will try to use any opportunity to do this, and of course to give a green light for any Azerbaijani operation. Passive, not doing anything is also the decision. Yes, doing nothing as Moscow did in the past. So. Giving, and I'm sure that in the case of aggravation the situation in the region, Moscow will give green light to Baku and not interfere in the region in this scenario. So I think this, I will stop here.
Thank you for it's not so optimistic answer. And Professor, your presentation was mainly, I would say, theoretical nature, but also with a general framework. So that's why maybe I will ask you to answer one broader historical type of question, because other our colleagues today they touched the issue of importance of historical, I would say, memories and historical practice to the political development in our region. Do you think what is going on in South Caucasus, but also involved in the post-Soviet space, it's something that's very unique process? It could be compared, for example, with situation after the First World War and Russian Revolution, or in some other examples, or it's really a very unique moment of developing region with another very unique political and historical circumstances.
Thank you, sir. I really don't like usually historical parallels. I think sometimes that geographical thinking is better than historical, because sometimes you look at the situation, for example, in early 20th century, it looks like something very like now, but in reality, if you go deeper, it's different. I would continue what Mustafa said today. He said that he listened to South Caucasus expression that God is far and Russia is very close. I did listen to this expression as well, but with different country. It was about God is far, but Turkey is too close. In 19th century, I read expressions that Turkey is far, but Persia is close. It's just about geographical composition. South Caucasus, by its geography, is a composition of 3 little countries surrounded by 3 maybe not global, but at least regional empires. And if we come to history, the question was about history. All these 3 countries, Turkey or Ottoman Empire before that, Iran or Persian Empire, and Russia. In my thinking, Soviet Union was one of the forms of Russian Empire. Some scholars can not agree with me, but in my paradigm it's like that. All of these 3 regional powers were inside the South Caucasus, and all South Caucasus, or part of South Caucasus, was sometime in history part of this empire. It brings to historical thinking as well. Mustafa, I don't know why I can't just tell you, but it was last holiday. Yeah, that's good. Said that we Turks don't forget. We Armenians as well, and Georgians as well, and Azerbaijanis as well. So history, yes, you have impact from history in memories, in self-determination, in I would say images of your neighbors. Yes, you do. But geography is still here, and we all, Armenians, Georgians, and Azerbaijanis, are 3 little countries surrounded by 3, not already Ottoman Empire, Persian Empire, but three countries which are regional powers. And when they say to you, let you open for us, let us open the world for us, sometimes historical images are coming to and begin to work, and you see risks. Because, for example, if you are about Armenia and Turkey, it's not Armenia closed border with Turkey. It was not on Turkish side. It's not Armenia who now don't want to open this border. At least on official level, they say once every 2 weeks that we want to do that, etc. So history works. History is part of identity, but geography works as well.
Geography matters, but also history as well. Mustafa, I think you understand that audience were expecting from you some details about Armenian-Turkish process, its absence, or I would say details, and maybe you also would like to talk a bit about that. But my question, it's maybe you also answer for both of them. My question is something is more practical one, again about this maybe nature of the Russian-Turkish relations. And you said it's very complex, and complexity it's arrives on the each dimension of relationship. You know, in Turkish media recently I see the information that delegation from the State Department arrived in Ankara, and they will discuss some details of further cooperation, including also military one. And one of the topics, I think maybe it was Nuran that visited Ankara, and one of the topics was about the possibility of Turkey to provide ammunition for 155 millimeters cannons to Ukraine. And for experts that are involved in this Ukrainian-Russian war, the importance of this even discussion is really very, very high. It's even more important than, for example, to providing Bayraktar to Ukrainian army. So do you think that because also of this nature of post-electoral Turkey development with Western country, that now is some type of special momentum comes in relation between Turkey and Russia, also Turkey and Europe, and there are also some speculations that also the planning visit of Vladimir Putin to Turkey was delayed because of such kind of these discussions. Thank you.
So I have about 45 minutes to
Depends on the nature of your answer.
Okay, let me start with where Alex left. That's the curse of history and curse of memory. This is the reality of this region. We don't forget. The people in this region don't forget. And I say this, I've written about this in Turkish-Greek relations, and I think it's true for the Caucasus also. The history is not in the past for the Caucasus. History is a living organism. People remember everything, and according to their own stories of this. And these stories are usually conflicting stories of each other. I don't see any countries, any two countries, sharing a similar history. They always have different sides of history. And that usually leads to conflicts. And also, everybody in this region have a long list of past grievances. When you say you did this, that, and that, and this, that, and then you get response, but you did this, that, and that, and that. And this is a curse. In order to move past this, we have to go beyond this. We have to somehow, if not forget the history, somehow we have to learn to live with the history and look to the future. Because looking back to the history is the easy way. Because we all are educated in our history. We read our history, we are educated, our families also are. And the states are also very responsibly tells us what is our history is or should be. But then it's easy way to look. We have to look back and look to the future in order to move forward. Here is the geography. I totally agree. There is a saying often repeated in Turkey. It is attributed to Ibn Haldun, and I translate roughly. It says the geography is the destiny. I'm geopolitical. I work on geopolitics, so I'm a firm believer of the importance of geography. And in the context of Turkish foreign policy, I keep repeating the geography is the 50% of the determinant of Turkish foreign policy. And I think I agree with Alex that geography is also very important to the Caucasus. The fact that three small countries or three small nations exist in this small area, even a smaller area, surrounded by three very ambitious, historically ambitious actors in the region, it's a recipe for instability, that's for sure. Now, on top of this, we have other ambitious actors, global ambitious actors, they are also refocusing. About, I think, 10, 15 years ago, with a colleague of mine, we wrote an article and we looked for different policy lines of global actors. They define different geographies. This is since the end of this Cold War, it's one of the popular games played by decision makers. They redefine geographies. Few weeks back, I saw something on the internet, on social media. Somebody was asking whether Poland was in Central Europe or Eastern Europe. And there was a huge debate about it. So I took this, and in a meeting, I asked an EU official, I said, there was this, I was joking actually, there was this thing in the internet, and I was making a kind of a joke, and he said, he took it very seriously. And he said, no, Poland is Central Europe, he said. But this, of course, redefining the geography, the same kind of redefining refers to the Caucasus as Southeast Europe. And the European officials talk about the Southeast Europe as if it existed forever. It did not. This is only last 10 years that we are hearing that Caucasus is Southeast Europe. And I've been studying history, I've been studying the geography. Nobody told me about Southeast Europe in the Caucasus in 19th century, in the 20th century. So it's a recent creation. But this is so what we did with my colleague is that we looked in this kind of redefinitions of geographies by the actors, global actors and regional actors, and where they do it in the world. And only geography at the time that we saw all the important actors were coalescing was the Black Sea region. Russia has its own policies, Unir abroad, the European Union has its policy, the neighborhood policy, and the United States has its policy of wider Black Sea region, and Turkey from the region had its own policy. But now, if I have to do this again, now I would maybe shift a bit focus to the Caucasus, where we have not only these actors, but we also have China now. Big Belt and Road Initiative also for finally somebody mentioned China. But this is a geography determines that focus is here in the Caucasus the next few decades. That for me means more conflict, more instability rather than more cooperation and more stability. I'm sorry, but I look from a very negative perspective to international relations. Coming to Turkey, Armenia. Well, this is of course obviously everybody since I came has been asking this, and I keep repeating the same thing. If you look at the agenda of Turkish foreign policy, Armenia is in page 10. On the page 1 is Turkey-US relations, and number of problems and crises and the negotiations are separate. Page 2, I think, is about what Turkey is going to do in Syria, Iraq this summer. And it links up with the Turkish-US relations as well. And all this as well. Then page 3, I think, has Turkey, Greek relations. Turkey's Greece, Mediterranean and everything. And it's linked up to the European Union in one hand. Page 4 has Ukraine and Black Sea, in my view. And as I said, page 10 has, among other issues, Turkey Armenia. Nobody really discusses publicly about Turkey and Armenia. This was different 10 years ago, or 15 years ago. It was different for some strange reason, and I think the strange reason is the government approach to the issue that Turkey-Armenia relations, future rapprochement or normalization is not discussed at all in public. It's very clear that the government made a decision to attach these two bilateral relations to make it a trilateral relations. We all know about Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan triangle. That triangle is real, and no matter what you argue, otherwise it's not changing the government policy. There are people in Turkey who are arguing that now there is a leader in Armenia who is willing to listen, and Turkey could move towards normalization rapidly and easily, which might change the Armenian position in the Caucasus and move it further away from Russia, and which is also in the benefit of Turkey, etc. There are some people arguing this in Turkey, but they are in minority and they are not listened to. And the majority view is we are waiting Azerbaijan and Armenia signing a peace. And I know the arguments there. I know it's not going anywhere, or maybe going slowly or whatever, but that seems to be. Why is that? It's very difficult to change is because of the strategic importance of Azerbaijan to Turkey. I'm not talking here, I'm using the word strategic knowingly. I'm not talking here about the historical, ethnical, linguistic, religious connection with Azerbaijanis and Turks. It's there, it exists, and it creates a public opinion, a very pro-Azerbaijan region. That's a given fact, but that's separate. That's maybe a factor foreign policy in a has a limited effect on Turkish foreign policy. What's more important for Turkey and the government in Turkey is the strategic connection between Turkey and Azerbaijan. It has so much implications. There is an economic connection, huge Azerbaijani investment in Turkey, and apart from that economic connection, there is a huge energy connection. I mean, this is one of the pillars of Turkish foreign policy since the early 1990s, to make Turkey a regional energy hub. Azerbaijan is the crucial actor there, and it became even more important now because the European Union wants to remove Russia from its sources. So Azerbaijan and Caspian region is again quite important, and that connection is also feeding into this importance. Apart from that, geographically, Azerbaijan is more important to Turkey than Armenia. It's the case because it creates a link to the Central Asia and Turkey states in Central Asia, which is also important to Turkey. Of course, the solution of the problem signing of a peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia and opening up the transport roads in the Caucasus. I'm talking opening up all of them, not only the Nakhchivan, Azerbaijan, but all of them. It will benefit Turkey the most. I would argue it will benefit Turkey more than Azerbaijan, more than Armenia. That's for sure. Because Turkey is the most advanced, has the most advanced economy in the region. And it has the most potential to export to the region, but actually more importantly export to Central Asia through this region if the connectivity is there. But again, this depends on strategic relations between Azerbaijan and Turkey. One last aspect of that relationship is this influence game. In order for Turkey to be able to challenge Russia in the Caucasus, we have to have a strong foothold. Azerbaijan is one of them. Georgia is, well, 2/3 of that. Armenia is the weak link, but without an Armenia, it's still possible with two legs between Georgia and Azerbaijan. But if you lose Azerbaijan, then there is no way that we can challenge Russia in the Caucasus, and Russians will be back to our Cold War borders. So I think there is more than more strategic calculations there. And of course, I don't know, and nobody knows what kind of a back deal connections between Azerbaijani government and Turkish government are. We don't know that. There might be some, but we don't know. Finally, Turkish-Russia. First of all, 155 ammunition. Turkey has been supplying that already to Ukraine. I think we were, I don't know, selling or giving it away. We don't know it because the information is kept very secret here. Turkey has been giving or selling all sorts of ammunition to Ukraine for a number of years now, since the conflict war started. The recent discussion is joint production of 155 with US and Turkey. And it was the American ambassador in Turkey who wrote an article, strangely, I think only the purpose was to announce this, it seems so, because the article didn't say anything else. He announced that a Turkish company is moving two production lines of 155 from Turkey to Texas, United States, to produce this ammunition in the United States and sell it to Ukraine. For me, this is really strange and cumbersome. A Turkish company moving a production line from Turkey to the United States to produce these things and sell to Ukraine. I don't know, but there is obviously some sort of negotiations and backroom deals with Turkey and the United States. We don't know the particulars yet. Part of it was to sell off F-16s to Turkey, but experts looking into the announcement, the price announced for buying of F-16s from the United States, 40 F-16s, and also the modernization kits, the price does not fit to the products. It seems that we are paying like 3 times more than necessary, which cannot be the case. So many people are arguing that there is some sort of other deal that's not announced in the United States. And if this is the case, then Turkish-US relations are moving into a right direction. This will have a direct impact on Turkish-Russian relations. As I believe, Turkish-Russian relations is partly function of Turkish-US relations. As Turkish-US relations deteriorated, Turkish-Russian relations are improved. In the Black Sea and in the Caucasus, the geography dictates whatever the preferences of the leadership of all countries. The geography dictates eventually Turkey and Russia will compete, will face each other. And I think the leaders on both countries know this. The Turkish support to Ukraine is, we try to list it. Everything is secret. The government doesn't announce it at all. But from the open source resources, you can list what Turkey has been giving to Ukraine. It's incredible. It's incredible. Different ammunitions, different weapon systems. It's not only UAVs or drones. Everything. But Russia is not saying anything to that because they seem to be happy that Turkey keeps the strait closed, and then they seem to be happy that Turkey does not participate with the Western sanctions, which allows Russia to open up another way out. And they seem to be happy that this kind of a relationship creates a wedge between NATO and Turkey. So they don't say anything about it. But Turkish support to Ukraine is increasing, and I think it shows the understanding in Turkey that without Ukraine, an independent Ukraine, Turkey will not be able to balance Russia in the Black Sea. That's an important strategic understanding. And it will, Turkey, of course, left alone cannot do anything, but with NATO support, with Western support, Turkey will not allow Ukraine to go down. The best scenario in this case for Turkey is a weakened Russia, obviously. And this is already happening in the region, and it helps in this geopolitical competition. But here, the delicacy of the situation is that you cannot be seen enjoying this change of geopolitics. You know, if you are in Turkey and the region of Turkey and the decision makers of Turkey, you don't appear to be very happy that Russia is weakening in this region. But at the same time, you are happy.
Thank you for this, I would say, interesting dichotomy of...
I have to say one caveat. I'm not the government. I don't represent Turkish government. I just try to understand what they are doing, why they are doing, from outside. I never worked for the government. And I have the minority view in Turkey usually, as far as Turkish foreign policy is concerned.
Thank you, Mustafa. So finally, our conference reached the level of sovereign democracy, and now I'm going to open the floor for questions and answers. However, because of course all participants are equal, but some more equal than others, so that's why maybe speakers, our colleagues, also would like before that to comment the colleagues' presentation or to come with some questions. Now կունենք հարց և պատասխանների սեսիան, ես կխնդրեմ բոլորին ովքեր հարցեր կան, նախ ներկայանան, նշեն թե ում ուղղված հարցը և բնականաբար փորձել դա անել ավելի կարճ, որ ավելի շատ ժամանակ տանք մասնակիցներին պատասխանել։
Should I ask a question in English or in Arabic? Or whatever? Oh. Okay. I'm Georg, the founder of the Armenian Institute for Resilience and Statecraft. But I have a goal to ask a question for the Armenian audience. This is the Armenian. Շնորհակալություն հայտնեմ բոլորին։ Այս կարևոր քննարկման համար։ Իշխանց ես մի քանի դիտարկում եւ բաց։ Դիտարկում հետևանքն ես սպասում եմ որ կարող շատ քննարկենք սցենարները, որոնք վերաբերում են Հարավային Կովկասում, թե ինչ պետք է լինի, ոչ ինչ չի եղել։ Դուք մասնակցել անդրադարձան նրանց, որտեղ մենք հիմա ունենք ուժակի, եթե ոչ շատ սպառնալիքներ Ադրբեջանի կողմից, վարչապետը 3-4 օր առաջ հայտարարեց, որ Ադրբեջանը կարող է հարձակվել Հայաստանի վրա, եթե մենք չտանք 4 թիվեր, նշանակում է, որ եթե նախապայման կա, նշանակում է, որ պատերազմի հավանականությունը մեծ է։ Ես կուզեմ դիտարկում անել կապված Ռուսաստանի ներկայության և ոչեկի ասած տարբեր մոտեցումների և մի քանի մեր բանախոսների և նարատիվների հետ, ուղղակի կարճ դիտարկում շատ բաներ նարատիվները կառաջանում, դրանք նարատիվներ են հիմնականում, որ օրինակ Պուտինը ատում է Փաշինյանի դրամը քաղաքականությունը իսկանում, կարծում որ դեռ ավելի շատ խոր հաշվարկներ կան և այդտեղ անձնական չեն խնդիրները, կամ որ Ռուսաստանը դուրս է եկել տարածաշրջանից, կամ որ 18 թվականից Ռուսաստանը դժգոհ էր պետփոխություններով Հայաստանում, դրանք շատ վիճելի թեմաներ են, բայց դրանք ուղղակի որպես դիտարկում են կարող առանձին քննարկելու հարցը, պարոն Դեսպան, հիշում եք 20 թվականի նոյեմբերից հետո մենք ունեցանք փոքրիկ զրույց, որտեղ դուք քննարկում ենք արդյոք ամեն ինչ վերջացել է և մենք կարող առաջ նայել և ես ասի դեռ ամեն ինչ նոր է սկսում նոյեմբերից հետո։ Ինչ է կարծում Հայաստանը և Ադրբեջանը ավելի շատ մոտ են խաղաղության պայմանագիր ստորագրելուն, թե նոր պատերազմ սկսել է։ Սա մի հարց է լույս հարցը Սաֆարագինին, Մուսավ մենք շատ հարցակներում իրար հետ քննարկում ենք ունեցել և այսօր բացառություն չի լինի։ Դուք հիշատակեցիք այն, որ Թուրքիան որպես ՆԱՏՕ-ի անդամ ինչ է արել առաջին անգամ։ Հիշեցան նաև, որ առաջին անգամ Թուրքիան որպես ՆԱՏՕ-ի անդամ փակել է Հայաստանի սահմանը եւ բլոկադայի ենթարկել Հայաստանը։ Եվ երկրորդը 20 թվականին Թուրքիան լեգիտիմացվել է ուժի կիրառումը խնդիրը լուծելու համար որպես ՆԱՏՕ-ի անդամ։ Հիմա հարցը հետևյալն է, երբ օր առաջ ՆԱՏՕ-ի գլխավոր քարտուղարը Հայաստանում հայտարարեց, որ աջակցում է Հայաստանի տարածքային ամբողջականությանը եւ սուվերենիտետին։ Արդյոք ՆԱՏՕ-ն ձեզ դուք ասացիք, որ կառավարություն չէ, ես կառավարություն չեմ, բայց մենք կարող ենք օգնել բոլորի երկրներին, ճիշտ հասկանալու իրավիճակը, արդյոք ՆԱՏՕ-ն պետք է դատապարտի Ադրբեջանի գործողությունները Հայաստանի նկատմամբ, որակելով դրանց որպես Հայաստանի տարածքային ամբողջականության խախտում։ Եվ թե այո, արդյոք Թուրքիան կմիանա դրան եւ կդատապարտի Ադրբեջանի ագրեսիվ քաղաքականությունը Հայաստանի նկատմամբ։ Շնորհակալություն։
Maybe we will collect one more question. See collect yes.
Thank you. My name is Steven Kauner from the Dutch Embassy. Thank you so much for the interesting discussion. I picked up on a very important and obvious thing, comment, which was that all countries in this region live with history as a living instrument, as something very relevant to life today, and with their memory, the memory of their parents, etc. And I think Mr. Aydin made the observation that they are different in all these countries, and as far as they differ, you have a potential for conflict. This triggered me with the following question. Last week at the Embassy of the Netherlands, we had a discussion with students in the area of international relations and focus on the European Union, say in the age group of 20, 24, and they were all very eager to go to Europe and work in Armenia on all these institutions which need to be reformed, etc. And then we asked them, who is your role model? And I think all of them, maybe there was one exception, all of them said Tigran the Great. And he lived before our era, and probably is not quite conducive to the values of European countries, and together with Armenia, the democratization, transparency, respect for the opinion of others, I don't know. So it seems to be completely a mess. How can, if their role model is Tigran, how can they work on democratization, I wonder? Okay, the question is, do you think that's important? What could be done about it? Or is it necessary to work on this? Thank you.
Is addressed to your question? Your question is addressed to in general?
Well, Mr. Aydin already said that we need to have more in common. So perhaps to, I think, to the Caucasus Institute, what do you think? Is this important to work on, or will it automatically develop in the right direction?
Okay, so it's addressed to Professor Iskandera. So, Ambassador, as you see, even your diplomatic immunity depends from our participants, so maybe you will start with your...
Thank you, Gabriel, for the question. Very short answer, really, is that while the peace process exists, and it does exist at the moment, then we should be able to take some comfort from that. And whilst both sides are talking to each other, which they have done recently in Berlin, that creates a channel for finding a sustainable solution. Now, there's a supplementary question to that, which is what type of platform is the most effective. But I think that's for both sides to establish. There has been a lot of Western engagement on this, as we've seen. The US, the EU, they have really put a lot of political capital into this. I think this has also shown the lack of desire to find a solution brokered by Russia, which we think is the right outcome. But yes, so to answer your question, I do take confidence from the fact that the peace process exists, and certainly from the UK part, we encourage both parties to engage constructively and to try and find a solution that will last for the benefit of both parties in the region.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think Wojciech also would like to react to the same question, please.
Thank you. Sure, I don't agree with Georg. I think personal feelings that judices play an important role in the decision-making process of Vladimir Putin. Yeah, this is not rational politics, but we should take it into account, and let's see what Putin's attitude towards the leaders of the Russian opposition. So, this policy is not always rational. Also, we have to take into account the personal moments.
Mustafa, next question was addressed to you. Please no more than half an hour.
In this case, yes, thank you. Well, I'll start from what NATO is. It sometimes does not get understood in Turkey either. And it seems to be some suspicion here too. NATO is not European Union. NATO is not OSCE, and NATO is not United Nations. NATO is an alliance, a military alliance of member countries. And it takes decision with the support, with the agreement of all the member countries. Right? So there was no NATO position, official position, in the Caucasus between Azerbaijan, the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. There was not, and so it's not a case of Turkey is not abiding by the rules of NATO. And I don't see a possibility of NATO getting involved in near future, in this case and in this issue, and having a policy on condemning one actor or another. It's not only Turkey that prevents that kind of things, but Turkey would prevent that anyway.
Just a small question then, what means to support the territorial integrity of Armenia? What does it imply?
I don't know. You have to ask that Secretary General of NATO. He has his own opinion. But if you are asking me what that it means territorial. And I think it has been not only Turkey's policy and NATO's policy. It has been OSCE's policy. It has been the policy of European Union too, supporting the territorial integrity of all the Caucasian countries. That has been policy from the beginning. It was the basis of OSCE policies and OSCE's ideas how to solve this Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. But of course, we have a different opinion what Nagorno-Karabakh was. Nagorno-Karabakh was infringement of the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan. That's how Turkey sees that position. So that's a different position. That's a different position. So in that sense, Turkey says Turkey respects the territorial integrity of Armenia as well as Azerbaijan as well as Georgia. And it expects all these countries to respect each other's territorial integrity. That's the official position.
And last but not least, Professor Stanley.
About the great history of the 21st century. Somebody here said that Russian background for the war, what they are saying, is not from 21st century. I would agree, but I wouldn't say that 21st century is everywhere. Russia is really a typical big country. I don't know how to translate from Russian to English. General, big power, great power of 19th century, and they act in 19th century. 21st century is not universal. You have in some parts of the world 13th century. In several, in northern Syria and north Iraq, 10 years ago, you have religious war. If you speak about history in European terms, you have what you have there. In 13th century, somewhere you have 17th century. In some countries, 23rd maybe. Here, in our region, we live in Western European terms. I would say in late 18th, early 19th century, epoch of collapse of empires, Napoleon wars, nationalisms, production of national histories, languages, self-determination of ethnic and cultural nations against empires. If we'll talk in Central European terms, it would be beginning of 20th century, collapse of Austro-Hungarian Empire, collapse of Ottoman Empire, etc. So we live in different periods, and if we live such a diverse world, so the goal is to move from 18th century to 21. Because I've been, for example, many times in Strasbourg, and it's okay. I walked. My French is very poor. I don't have German at all, so I spoke English there. And sometimes you buy water in Germany and I don't know, bread in France without knowing where is the currency is euro everywhere. You speak English, etc., etc. But yeah, no. Can you imagine if I would go to Strasbourg of 18th century, try to explain that people that currency is not important, borders are not important, Europe can be united, what should they do in the end? So the goal is to move, and to move is not about changing of political views on that. It's about education. It's about media. It's about history, history books, etc. So if not, you will go, when you watch Turkish soap operas about Süleyman the Great, it's more or less the same. It's not about history, it's about symbols. Or in Armenia about Tigran the Great, or in Jordan, etc. So to move from that period, it's about Europeanization, about modernization, rationalization of discourses, talking about how to more understanding what is Europe, because people can say that Europe is very good, but if you try to understand what they mean by Europe, you will find Santa Claus who give you everything what you don't yet have. So it's about move from one century to another.
We still have the time for a couple of questions, so please, Arek and Pierre.
Just meeting with Ambassador and the question. I have a question from our Turkish panelists, and it's in a way connected with the discussion we already.
Did you hear what I said before, or I have to repeat? Okay. I have a question to our Turkish panelists, and this question is in a way connected with the discussion we have heard just a few minutes ago. And the question goes like that. As you of course know, we can see a certain change of Azerbaijan's narrative. What I mean is the more and more often using the expression, the term of Western Azerbaijan, and this notion looks as applies to, or at least can be considered as applying to all the territory of the Republic of Armenia. So my question goes like that: does this fact in any way affects the way Turkish people, Turkish experts tend to perceive the situation between Armenia and Azerbaijan and perceive all the situation in the region. Thanks.
Thank you. And it's very short.
Good afternoon. I'm Alek Kochin, head of the Research Center on Security Policy. My question will be again to Mr. Mustafa Aydin. It's somewhat similar but more specific to the Romanian ambassador's question. When we hear that it's sort of a precondition for the Armenian-Turkish normalization to be prior to the Armenian-Turkish normalization, there should be Armenian-Azerbaijani normalization. But it's also important for us to understand what do our Turkish colleagues mean when they say Armenian-Azerbaijani normalization. Because there is first variant of it, the narrow piece that is now being discussed or negotiated upon, as is signing the peace treaty, doing the delimitation and demarcation, and coexist separately. Let's say this is the first variant. But there is also the second one, as what would make Azerbaijan happy. That's something quite different. So what do our Turkish colleagues mean when they say there should be the Armenian-Azerbaijani normalization? Is it the concept of the narrow peace and signing the peace treaty? Would that be enough? Would that be sufficient? Or should your Azerbaijani colleagues tell you that they are happy and only after that you can do the normalization with Armenia? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mustafa, it's not an easy task to be Turkish speaker in Armenia. So all questions are addressed to you. Right to me.
This might come to a news to you, but Turkish experts and people who are following the region are not immediately following the region and arguments of Azerbaijanis and Armenians. So any kind of an announcement from one of the actors in the negotiations to impact the process of the negotiations are not immediately reflected upon in Turkey. And I would argue that very few people would be aware of this Western Azerbaijan rhetoric in Turkey. Very few people. Only people who are really closely following, maybe diplomatic circles. Whether that has an effect on Turkish policy? No. The short answer is no. I don't think it has any effect on Turkish policy at all. But we have seen this kind of rhetoric from different countries. I remember, Armenia was talking about Western Armenia, and that get offended the Turks. But we get over it now. The second question, I think the Turkish position is not the normalization of Armenia and Azerbaijan, is the signing of the peace deal. This is the rhetoric, the official argumentation. So I don't have any other really opening or interpretation. When you sign the deal, if whether the Turkish government would change its position, I have no idea. But currently the position is the signing of the deal, not the normalization.
Thank you, Mustafa. And before we will go to the most academic part of our conference, that is...
sorry, can we have another question? One more? No? Okay.
Okay. Maybe So we have this event like the marked designation of lunch. So lunch will be on the second floor, and our colleagues will help you to find the place. But before that, please join me and thank our participants for this very interesting assignment. That was very